The judge overseeing former President Donald Trump's classified documents case held a sealed hearing today on Trump's efforts to have the entire case dismissed. Overnight, prosecutors filed these never-before-seen pictures of classified documents found.
Trump just had an absolutely catastrophic hearing where he completely lost it on the judge. And what happened is devastating for his legal case. In his New York civil fraud trial, Trump exploded on the witness stand, yelling, pointing at Justice Arthur Engoron, calling the judge the fraud. And the judge had to warn him, "This is not a political rally. Please just answer the questions." But Trump wouldn't stop. Reporters in the courtroom said Trump just yelled at the judge for a several-minute stretch, railing that the proceeding was rigged, ignoring repeated attempts by the court and his own lawyers to calm him down. His own legal team trying to get him to stop, and Trump just kept going. And here's what makes this so damaging. These courtroom meltdowns aren't isolated incidents. This is a pattern. Trump has blown up at judges in multiple cases, in civil fraud trials, in immunity hearings, in classified documents proceedings. Every single time the pressure gets high, Trump loses control, and every single time it makes his legal situation worse. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built John Brown's show to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, please subscribe because you might think you are but aren't. Your subscription actually matters here. All right, let's get into what actually happened in that courtroom. Trump took the witness stand in his New York civil fraud trial. This is the case where Attorney General Letitia James accused him of inflating asset values to get favorable loans. Trump was supposed to testify in his own defense, answer questions from his lawyers, maybe make his case to the judge, but that's not what happened. Instead, Trump exploded, started yelling at the judge, pointing at him, making accusations. The judge had to intervene and say, "This is not a political rally. You need to just answer the questions." Notice what that warning reveals. Trump was treating the courtroom like a campaign event, like he could just go off on his usual rants about witch hunts and rigged systems, but the judge shut that down immediately. This is a court of law, not a rally. Answer the questions or face consequences. And Trump ignored the warning, kept going. Reporters documented him yelling at the judge for several minutes, not seconds, minutes, railing that the whole proceeding was rigged against him, that it was unfair, that it was a witch hunt, all the usual stuff. But in a courtroom, under oath, in front of the judge who's going to decide his case. Make sure you're subscribed because here's what makes this absolutely catastrophic for Trump. The judge has to rule on this case, has to decide whether Trump committed fraud, has to determine how much Trump owes in penalties, and Trump just spent several minutes yelling at him, calling him a fraud, accusing him of running a rigged proceeding. Think about how that affects the judge's view of Trump. You're the judge, you're trying to run a fair proceeding, and the defendant starts screaming at you, ignoring your instructions, disrespecting the court. How sympathetic are you going to be to that defendant's arguments? How lenient are you going to be when it comes time to impose penalties? You're not. You're going to be tougher, more skeptical of their claims, less willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. That's basic human nature, and Trump's behavior is guaranteeing he gets the harshest possible treatment. Now let me bring the receipts on what happened next, because the meltdown didn't end with that one outburst. Trump's own lawyers tried to calm him down, repeatedly. The court tried to get him to stop. The judge gave warnings, and Trump ignored all of them. Just kept ranting, kept attacking, kept turning the courtroom into a circus. Eventually, the judge had to impose consequences. Fined Trump for violating gag orders, threatened more serious penalties if the behavior continued. Warned that if Trump cannot control himself, the judge will control him. That's a threat of contempt. Of potentially jailing Trump if he keeps disrupting proceedings. And it shows how badly this backfired. Share this video with everyone because here's the pattern we're seeing across multiple cases. This isn't the first time Trump has melted down in court. In prior hearings, Judge Engoron already fined Trump, already threatened serious consequences, already warned him about turning court into a campaign stage. Trump has violated gag orders repeatedly, orders that say he can't attack court staff or witnesses. He does it anyway, gets fined, and then does it again. That's not strategy. That's someone who cannot control himself. Someone who sees a judge giving instructions and just can't help but attack. Notice what this reveals about Trump under pressure. When he's in a controlled environment where he can't just walk away or tweet his way out of problems, he loses it. The courtroom is the one place where his usual tactics don't work, where he has to follow rules, where someone else has power over him, and he absolutely cannot handle it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button because here's what NBC and Reuters have documented. Judges who ruled against Trump have faced harassment and threats. Some have had to change their daily routines, install security upgrades at their homes, all because they made rulings Trump didn't like. And where does that harassment come from? Trump's supporters. People who hear Trump attack a judge publicly, who hear him call proceedings rigged, who hear him say the judge is a fraud, and then they harass that judge, threaten them, make their lives hell. That's the real-world consequence of Trump's courtroom behavior, not just hurting his own case, but endangering the judges who are just doing their jobs. Now let's talk about why these meltdowns are so legally damaging. Because Trump is alienating the very people who have power over his fate. Judges decide cases. Judges impose sentences. Judges determine penalties. And Trump is making them hate him. Not in a personal sense, but in the sense that his behavior makes it impossible for judges to be sympathetic. When you disrespect the court repeatedly, when you ignore warnings, when you attack the judge personally, you're guaranteeing the worst possible outcome. Because even if the judge tries to be fair, even if they're trying to be impartial, they're human. And humans respond to being disrespected. Share this with everyone because here's what makes this a catastrophic hearing specifically. Trump was on the witness stand, under oath, required to answer questions. And instead of doing that, instead of making his case, he went on a tirade for minutes against the judge. That creates a permanent record. Everything said under oath in court is documented, transcribed, preserved. And that record shows Trump couldn't control himself, couldn't answer questions calmly, couldn't respect the court's authority. That record will be used against him, in this case and in future cases, showing a pattern of someone who cannot handle scrutiny, who cannot tell the truth under oath, who cannot behave appropriately in legal proceedings. Notice what Trump's own lawyers were doing during this meltdown. They were trying to stop him, trying to calm him down, trying to prevent him from hurting his own case, and Trump ignored them. Think about that. Your own legal team is telling you to stop talking, and you keep going anyway. That's not confidence. That's not strategy. That's someone who is out of control. Because here's what judges have said in response to this pattern. Judge Endangering warned, this is not a political rally. That's telling Trump, you can't campaign here. You have to follow rules. You have to answer questions. You have to respect the court. And Judge Endangering also said, if Trump cannot control himself, the judge will. That's a threat of contempt, of sanctions, of potentially jailing Trump if he continues to disrupt proceedings. Because courts have that power. Judges can hold people in contempt for disrupting proceedings. And Trump is pushing that boundary, seeing how far he can go before a judge actually throws him in jail. Now let me show you why this pattern extends beyond just the New York fraud case. Trump has had angry clashes in immunity hearings, in fights over whether he can be prosecuted for crimes committed while president. He's had meltdowns in proceedings about classified documents, about whether he illegally retained national defense information. In every single high-stakes hearing, Trump loses it, attacks the judge, claims everything is rigged, disrupts the proceeding. That's a pattern of self-sabotage. Share this video because here's what that self-sabotage looks like practically. Trump needs judges to be sympathetic to his arguments, to give him the benefit of the doubt, to interpret laws favorably, but his behavior makes that impossible. When you attack a judge, when you call them a fraud, when you disrupt their courtroom, you're making it certain they'll rule against you, not because they're biased, but because your behavior has eliminated any goodwill that might have helped you. Notice what the warnings about turning court into a campaign stage reveal. Trump literally cannot distinguish between a courtroom and a rally. In a rally, he can say whatever he wants, insult whoever he wants, make wild accusations, and his supporters cheer. But in a courtroom, there are rules. There are consequences for lying. There are penalties for disrupting proceedings. And Trump cannot adapt to that environment. Now let's talk about the political damage from these meltdowns. Because it's not just legal. When voters see Trump screaming at judges, losing control on the witness stand, getting fined for violating gag orders, what image does that create? Someone who is unstable, someone who cannot handle pressure, someone who cannot tell the truth under oath. That's devastating for anyone claiming to be fit for office. And here's what happened with the gag orders specifically. Judges imposed orders saying Trump couldn't attack court staff, couldn't threaten witnesses, couldn't make statements that would intimidate people involved in the case. And Trump violated those orders repeatedly, got fined, and then violated them again. That shows someone who thinks rules don't apply to him, who thinks he can do whatever he wants without consequences. But the fines prove otherwise. The threats of more serious consequences prove otherwise. Now let me bring the receipts on the harassment of judges. NBC and Reuters both documented this independently. Judges who ruled against Trump started receiving threats, harassment online and in person. Some had to change their daily routines, take different routes to work, avoid predictable patterns because they were worried about their safety. And some had to install security upgrades at their homes, at their offices, all because they did their jobs, made rulings based on law and evidence, and Trump attacked them for it. Notice what this reveals. Trump's attacks on judges don't just stay in the courtroom. They spill out into judges' private lives. When Trump calls a judge a fraud publicly, his supporters hear that, and some of them take action, harassing the judge, threatening them, making it so they can't feel safe in their own homes. Share this with everyone because here's why this matters for judicial independence. Judges are supposed to make decisions based on law, not based on fear, not based on what's politically popular, but based on what the law requires. And when judges face threats for doing that, when their lives are disrupted because they ruled against a powerful person, that threatens the entire system. It makes judges think twice about ruling fairly, makes them wonder if the personal cost is worth it. And that's exactly what someone like Trump wants. He wants judges to be afraid to rule against him. Here's what the several-minute stretch of yelling reveals. This wasn't a brief outburst. This wasn't Trump losing his temper for a few seconds. This was sustained screaming at a judge for minutes, while the judge tried to stop him, while his lawyers tried to calm him down, while the court tried to restore order, and Trump just kept going. That level of loss of control is pathological. That's not someone making a strategic decision. That's someone who literally cannot stop themselves from attacking. Now let's talk about what ignoring repeated attempts to calm him down means. His own lawyers were trying to get him to stop. The people on his side, the people trying to win his case, and Trump wouldn't listen to them. Think about the level of ego required for that. Your legal team is begging you to stop hurting your own case, and you ignore them because you're so convinced you're right, so convinced everyone else is wrong, so unable to control yourself. Share this video because here's what Judge Engoron's warning: if Trump cannot control himself, the judge will actually means. That's a threat of contempt of court, of holding Trump in contempt for disrupting proceedings, and contempt can result in jail time. The judge can order someone locked up for contempt. Usually it's temporary, until they agree to comply with court orders, but it's real jail. And Judge Engoron is telling Trump, keep this up and I'll put you in jail. That's how serious the behavior has become. Now let me show you why this pattern of meltdowns is self-sabotage. Because Trump's goal should be winning his cases, getting favorable rulings, minimizing penalties. But his behavior achieves the opposite, makes judges angry at him, makes them less sympathetic to his arguments, makes them more likely to impose harsh penalties. That's textbook self-sabotage, hurting yourself through your own actions. Notice what this reveals about Trump's psychology. He cannot submit to authority, cannot accept that someone else has power over him, cannot follow rules that constrain him. And in a courtroom, all of those things are required. Judges have authority, they have power, and there are rules you must follow. Trump's inability to accept that makes courtroom appearances disasters. And here's the fundamental question: is this strategy or inability? Is Trump deliberately trying to intimidate judges through these outbursts? Or is he genuinely unable to control himself under pressure? And the evidence suggests inability, because the outbursts make things worse, not better, because his own lawyers try to stop him, Because the pattern is consistent across cases. Someone using meltdowns as strategy would be selective, would do it when it serves a purpose. But Trump does it every time he's under oath and under pressure. That suggests he cannot help it. Share this with everyone because here's what the harassment of judges reveals about the broader threat. This isn't just about Trump's cases. This is about whether judges can do their jobs without fearing for their safety, whether they can make rulings based on law without facing threats to themselves and their families. That's a fundamental question about rule of law. The bottom line is this. Trump has catastrophic hearings where he goes nuts on judges with a pattern of courtroom meltdowns that hurt his cases and threaten judicial independence. In his New York civil fraud trial, Trump exploded on the witness stand, yelling and pointing at Justice Arthur Engoron, calling the judge the fraud. Judge had to warn, "This is not a political rally, please just answer the questions." Reporters said Trump yelled at the judge for a several-minute stretch, railing that the proceeding was rigged, ignoring repeated attempts by the court and his own lawyers to calm him down. Judge Engoron has fined Trump and threatened more serious consequences for violating gag orders, for turning court into a campaign stage. Warned that if Trump cannot control himself, the judge will. NBC and Reuters documented judges who ruled against Trump facing harassment and threats. Some reporting changed routines and security upgrades. Trump's attacks on judges spill beyond the courtroom into their private lives. The catastrophic hearing pattern shows consistent self-sabotage across multiple cases. Civil fraud outbursts, immunity clashes, classified documents fights, Trump screaming about witch hunts every time. Judges respond with warnings about contempt, with fines, with limits on what Trump can say, with comments like, "This is not a rally." His behavior is backfiring, hardening judicial attitudes, making judges tougher on him. These meltdowns hurt Trump legally by alienating judges who decide his cases and sentences. Hurt him politically by reinforcing image of someone who cannot handle scrutiny, who cannot tell truth under oath. The harassment of judges positions this as bigger story about Trump versus rule of law, about judicial independence, about whether judges can do their jobs free from fear. Trump's attacks encourage supporters to harass judges who ruled against him, creating threats that change judges' lives, forcing security upgrades and changed routines. The self-sabotage in court combined with attacks outside court represent assault on judicial independence. The fundamental question is whether this is strategy to intimidate or genuine inability to control himself. The pattern suggests inability. Trump cannot stop despite warnings from his own lawyers, cannot control himself in high-pressure situations like testimony under oath. The consequences make outcomes worse because judges respond to disrespect by being tougher. The legal walls are closing in despite the meltdowns, despite the attacks. Courts continue to function because judicial independence is surviving. Judges will not be intimidated by behavior that produces fines, gag orders, threats of jail for contempt. The catastrophic hearings where Trump goes nuts on judges are making his legal situation worse, not better. That self-sabotage will continue as cases proceed toward outcomes he cannot escape through meltdowns. Subscribe right now because this pattern is accelerating. More cases coming to trial, more hearings where Trump will take the stand, more opportunities for him to lose control. And every time he does, every time he yells at a judge or violates a gag order or turns court into a circus, his legal situation gets worse. The judges get tougher, the penalties get harsher, the public image gets more damaged. This is Trump's legal nightmare playing out in real time. His inability to control himself under pressure, his compulsion to attack anyone with authority over him, his refusal to follow rules, all of it creating a catastrophic pattern of courtroom meltdowns that hurt his cases, that threaten judges, that undermine judicial independence, and there's no sign he can stop. No indication he'll suddenly learn to behave appropriately in court. The pattern is too consistent, too reflexive, too much a part of who he is. So as the legal walls close in, as more cases proceed to trial, we're going to see more of these catastrophic hearings. More judges warning him, more fines being imposed, more threats of contempt, and Trump getting angrier and more desperate as the consequences pile up. This story continues. Stay tuned.